We knew he was a musician from the time he was born.
She's a leader.
He has an insatiable curiosity for things and how things work.
She plays piano and she loves percussion.
Oh, he has such a kind heart.
I've always known that she was going to be really strong and that she would change the world.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Welcome to the 3rd season of the How She Moms podcast. We're starting out with a 3-episode series about one of the very best parts of motherhood, discovering each of our kids' unique talents and helping them cultivate those talents. Before we start this episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Baby Trend. You may already know that I love their 2-in-1 convertible car seat. Recently, they also sent me the Expedition Race Tech jogging stroller. This is a great stroller. True to form, Baby Trend thought about all the little details. First of all, you can lock or unlock the front wheel with a simple switch, so it's really easy to maneuver. And they're all-terrain tires, so they can handle some off-roading too. The stroller has 2 cup holders and a cell phone holder up by the handles, which can adjust to any position you want, including facing inward, to make a bar you can push with one hand. There's plenty of room in the basket too, which is always a big deal to me, and there's mesh on the sides that goes all the way up to the frame, so your blanket won't slip out and drag on the ground. And this may seem like a small detail, but the tube stems are angled out so you can actually fit the pump on them to get some air in those tires. Can you tell I've struggled with this in the past? They really do think about all the little details. But the coolest thing is how it folds. My sister-in-law audibly gasped when I reached into a hidden pocket in the seat and grabbed a single handle with one hand to collapse the whole stroller. My other favorite thing about Baby Trend's products is that they're both high quality and affordable. So many moms think they have to break the bank to buy a jogging stroller they can actually jog with. But you can find this stroller right at Target.com. Having kids is like Forrest Gump's proverbial box of chocolates. We really never know what we're going to get. Maybe she'll be a beautiful writer. Maybe he will have a knack for making everyone laugh. Maybe she will be a natural leader. Maybe he'll be able to make a violin just sing. As mothers, we get a front row seat as these people unfold before our eyes. And though we don't get to choose what their talents will be,
we have a chance to help them discover these things about them that maybe they don't even know.
This is Jen Brewer, a mother of 7, a writer, a nutritionist, a humanitarian, a woman of many talents. Here's a great story about how she helped her son discover one of his talents.
He took a physics class when he was a junior and instantly fell in love with it. And he had no idea he was in love with it. All he did was talk about how hard it was. But 6 months in, every conversation we had, he would turn back to physics. "Ooh, Mom, let me explain the physical law behind this. And let me explain what's happening." And it wasn't until he was into a senior year and doing college applications that he's like, "I don't know what I want to study. What even do I major in?" And for me, that made my chin drop. Because I just thought, are you kidding me? Like every other sentence out of your mouth has to do with physics. Like, really, are you not seeing this? Have you not realized this? Like, and he'll tell me, "Oh, I had a free hour, so I went to the physics room and we put up this experiment." And I'm like, dude, that's your passion. Like, if you will go into a room, your open hour, and do your own stuff, that's like a neon sign. And me telling him that, he was like, "Really? You think so? Like, doesn't everybody just think that?" I so wish, if I could go back to my 17-year-old self, I so wish somebody would have come to me and said, "Look, you love doing this. Own this. Own this part of you." It would have saved me 20 years.
This is the gift we can give our kids to help them figure out their inherent gifts. Some talents are obvious. Many of the moms I interviewed started off by listing some of these visible talents in art, music, or athletics. So I started digging deeper and asking about less tangible talents. Then I talked to Becky Squire, editor of Latter-day Woman magazine, who specializes in helping people, especially women, recognize their gifts. When I asked her about less tangible talents, she said,
I don't think we need to differentiate them. So I think if you think of it as qualities, whether you use them spiritual ways or physical ways, they're all qualities. And if they can be used to bless the lives of others, then it's a spiritual gift in my book. And you can use so many qualities, so many gifts and strengths to bless others. Somebody who loves to laugh, like you want to be around that person, right? That person makes you happy. Somebody who is determined is going to be a great leader and can bless many people's lives. Somebody who is confident is a great example and can help you feel included. There's just so many. And of course, somebody who is a beautiful pianist and somebody who's a great athlete, like all of those things you can use to bless the world.
I love this approach. Yes, we want to help our kids recognize how amazing they are, but also how they can use their gifts to bless others. To help us on our way to identifying our kids' talents, Becky Squire has compiled a list of 72 spiritual gifts from the Bible and various other sources, with gifts such as gentleness, kindness, optimism, self-control, responsibility, faith, work, humor, gratitude, endurance, friendship, efficiency, etc. I'm not going to read all 72, but it's a great starting point. You can get it right at the homepage of Becky's website, beckysquire.com. I printed it off and we used it just this past Labor Day weekend at our annual family retreat. I had each kid use the list to identify 3 to 5 of the gifts of every family member. Then we wrote them on Post-it notes and stuck them to the wall, so each kid could see the gifts that everyone else identified for them. Another great list of strengths comes from a wonderful book by Mary Reckmeyer called Strengths-Based Parenting. This book is based on an assessment that many businesses use to help identify the strengths of their employees, the Gallup-Clifton Strengths Assessment. It's kind of like a Myers-Briggs personality test, but just focused on talents. I love this specific book, Strengths-Based Parenting, because it focuses on identifying your strengths as a parent and then also identifying the strengths of your children. I took the online test, which you have to pay for, but it came free with the book, and my 5 highest strengths out of the 34 talent themes were achievement, connectedness, I like to make connections between people, things, and ideas, ideation, being fascinated by ideas, intellection, thinking and solving problems, and learning. Is there any wonder what drove me to start this podcast? Anyway, their list of talent themes is smaller for younger kids under 10 as they are just beginning to demonstrate their specific gifts. So the list for kids includes achieving, caring, competing, confidence, dependability, discoverer, future thinker, organizer, presence, like they enjoy being the center of attention, and relating, good at starting and maintaining friendships. Reckmeyer says, the best way to start discovering your young child's talents is by observing her in a variety of situations and settings over time, which is something parents are well positioned to do. Reckmeyer then gives a list of 4 things to watch for. First is your child's yearnings. What activities or environments is your child repeatedly drawn to or eager to try? Next is rapid learning. What new skills or activities does your child pick up quickly and easily? Third is satisfaction. When is your child most enthusiastic and fulfilled? Which activities is she excited about doing again and again? And then there's timelessness. When does your child become so engrossed that she seems to lose track of time? Sometimes it also helps to get an outsider's perspective or another insider like your spouse, teachers, extended family, and friends. Becky Squire recently had a great experience with observing talents in girls she didn't even know. She was asked to speak at a girls' camp on this topic of identifying talents.
I was invited to go to dinner before I spoke. And so I got up there about an hour earlier than I was supposed to be speaking. And I had dinner. I sat down with a couple leaders and a bunch of girls. And I kind of sat there eating my dinner, just listening to the girls. They were talking about school, they were talking about friends, they were talking about boys. And as I was listening, I picked up on some gifts that these girls had. And I had never met them. And so as I stood up to speak, finally, I asked them to point out gifts in each other because they are obviously friends. They know each other. They're in the same group. And so I asked them to point out gifts in each other, and it was just dead silent. And so I felt really bad. I was like, man, these guys can't even point out a gift in each other. And maybe they were just put on the spot. And so that's when I decided, you know what, I've been sitting with these girls and I still barely know them, but I can tell that this girl, she likes to make people laugh. And she's really silly. And that is a strength. And this girl over here, there was one girl I just could feel like such a good spirit about her. And I couldn't even put my finger on it, but I could just feel it. And so I just told her that. And I just went around. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it to every single girl, but I did it to probably about 5 girls and just told them the things that I saw in them. And I just wish I could always see their faces in my mind. I hope I never forget how they, how happy they looked when I said that. And so if I can do that as somebody who just barely knows somebody, think about the impact you can have by telling your friend or your spouse or your children what gifts you see in them. And then especially what you could do about telling yourself that.
I also asked Becky how she applies her own advice at home with her kids.
I try to frequently point out each other's strengths. And so that helps us to see things that we might not see in ourselves, and also to see things that we might not see in others. And it, of course, builds a little bit of confidence too. And so I think just regularly talking about our strengths, it doesn't have to be a puffed up, prideful thing to talk about our strengths, especially because whenever we do in our family, I always put the caveat that your strengths are to bless other people. That's the reason. It's not to put yourself up on a pedestal and say how great I am. So yeah, I kind of make my family look for those strengths in each other. And then we talk about how we can use them to bless others, whether it's just friends, close friends, neighborhood, or maybe using social media to reach all the corners of the world.
That's cool. So is that like at a formal family meeting, or is that just incidental as you're going about your day, more organic?
It's usually when my kids are fighting. It's definitely not formal, because I think I did try that a couple times and they would just always roll their eyes. And so it's more informal, just when I feel like maybe our house needs that. And that seems to always go better.
Another really interesting thing that came up in several of my interviews is that sometimes a child's strengths show up in their most challenging behavior. Rebecca Brown Wright, a writer and the host of the podcast Pause and Connect, was one of the women who brought this up.
I am constantly noticing what they're gravitating to, and even what they're bad at, I have found has been so insightful. Their weaknesses are actually their strengths a lot of times. And so that has been something that's really cool, where I can see they have this weakness. So like my oldest is really intense and stands her ground in a really difficult way for parents, because she will not back down. And so, that could be like, maybe she did something wrong, but she will not admit that she did that wrong thing. And that used to be really, really hard. And then I wanted to see, well, how can this weakness be a strength? And so I realized, even though she might be being difficult right now in a disciplined way, she's actually got this really great confidence in herself and confidence that she can stand up for what she believes in. And so I can say that to her when she's doing this thing, and I can say, hey, you have this incredible strength of will, and I am so happy you have that. And right now, it's not working for this situation because X, Y, and Z, but this is so good. And I can see it's going to help you in piano, and I can see it's going to help you with your friends, and I can see it's going to help you in your grades. And so then that becomes a talent for her, where I think it could have become her worst feature if I didn't point out that this difficult thing for me is actually a really incredible talent that she has.
This concept warranted a whole chapter in one of my favorite parenting books of all time, which I've read and reread, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee by the amazing Wendy Mogul. The book is a guide to parenting based on principles of the Jewish faith, and there's a chapter in it called The Blessing of Self-Control, Channeling Your Child's Yetzer Hara. Wendy Mogul describes the Hebrew concept of Yetzer Hara as, quote, the evil impulse that is also the source of all passion and creativity. The Yetzer Hara is a warehouse for our curiosity, ambition, and potency. It is the yeast in the dough. Jewish wisdom teaches us that our child's unique Yetzer Hara contains the blueprint for her greatness. Our job as parents is clear-cut, if not simple. We are to identify these traits and remove stumbling blocks before the blind, so that our children's Yetzer Hara can be channeled and expressed in a constructive rather than a destructive way. These words have gotten me through many a playground tantrum and sibling brawl. Luckily, I read this book early on, and I've read it probably a dozen times now. My oldest son's stubbornness has indeed started to turn to a strength of character. Another son's abundant energy has channeled into amazing feats of creativity and athleticism. Wendy Mogul gives a whole list of ways we can turn around the ways we think of difficult behavior. She says, it's essential that you learn to see those intense, often irksome traits as the seed of your child's greatness. Try thinking of your stubborn or whining child as persistent, your complaining child as discerning, your overeating child as lusty, your argumentative child as forthright and outspoken, your loud child as exuberant, your shy child as cautious and modest, your reckless, accident-prone, or rule-breaking child as daring and adventurous, your bossy child as commanding and authoritative, and your picky, nervous, obsessive child as serious and detail-oriented. I love this list, but man, it's easier said than done. Just ask Jasmine Wilson.
She's a leader, and raising a leader takes lots of patience and lots of understanding because they ask questions, lots and lots of questions. And they also, they have opinions. And so one of the things that I really love that I've seen as a great character trait in her is that she doesn't have a fear of asking a bad question. And we've taught her there are no bad questions. You ask. If there's something that you want to know, you ask it.
Jasmine is really good at recognizing and cultivating the talents of her 9-year-old daughter, Madison. So good, in fact, that the next episode will be a joint interview with this delightful mother and daughter, including a song Jasmine helped Madison write and record. This concept of recognizing strength and weakness is especially important when we're dealing with neuroexceptional children with conditions like ADHD or autism, or children with mental illness. This is the whole concept behind the company Tiffany Feingold and her husband Kyle started, called Guiding Bright Minds. They help families with children diagnosed with dyslexia, autism spectrum, ADD, ADHD, and other disorders to find resources and professionals to help them. I love their mission statement: to transform our community, to recognize the brilliance in each diverse learner's mind, empower each child to use their strengths while finding their superpowers, and embrace their needs so today's diverse learners can become tomorrow's leaders. Tiffany and Kyle's son has ADHD, so they've been able to practice their philosophies firsthand. They teach their son that there's nothing wrong with having ADHD. It just means his mind works differently.
And even talking about ADHD being the superpower, that isn't a barrier, but that is an opportunity of how you learn differently, but also what that brings with it to the table. So not just spoken that, oh, because I have ADHD, I'm bouncing off the walls or I can't sit still, but because of that, you can sit down and do an entire Lego set, in 3 hours and not leave the table, because you're so have that hyper focus and that concentration and that passion. So it's honing in and making sure that those are talked about in a positive light versus a negative light, and that they have that opportunity to share that with their friends and with their teachers and with other adults, that they have that gift. We're all different. Because it's funny, I can't do math. And he'll laugh at me. He's like, don't you have a college degree and you can't help me with my first grade math? I'm like, that's my weakness. We all have weaknesses and we all have strengths. To tell him, you're not unique just because you have a diagnosis. I mean, you're not different, because we all are. That's why we want to focus on the needs, but the strengths. Like your son might have ADD, but he's a drummer, or he's a soccer player, or he's a hiker, a skier. What is it that they shine in? And I tell Sam that is your superpower, because any employer, school might be tough now, but once you're done, any employer is going to want somebody who has ADHD, who has that, because they have hyper focus. They will be the most dedicated employees. And you see that. Like if you look at Richard Branson, he dropped out when he was 16. He had dyslexia. He was called stupid. A teacher told him, you're either going to end up dead or in jail. Those are your options. He's a multi-billionaire. He's the first one to have $8 billion companies. And until we change society, and especially our education and legislation, to say, please don't judge just because you can't see, the disability doesn't mean it's not real.
As the mother of at least one child with ADD, and the jury's still out on a couple more, I so appreciate this perspective. The energy that often comes with ADD, the ability to focus on what he's really passionate about, has definitely been true for my son. 2 of Chantel Allen's kids in particular have really challenged her.
My anxious son, and then I have a really rebellious daughter. And now I've kind of switched it. I'm like, they are going to be so amazing as adults because of these things that they're going through. I'm like, one's going to be super stubborn, which is going to be so great in the business world to be able to get what she wants. So it's like learning to see your kids' weaknesses as their greatest strengths. And depression, anxiety, they may seem like a weakness to some, but I'm like, that is such a strength that they get to have that and work through that. They're going to have such a different knowledge because of that, and they'll be able to help other people because of it too.
Chantel does not downplay the difficulty of depression and anxiety, but she has a really interesting perspective of how her own anxiety has helped her see the world differently. You can hear more about how she manages her anxiety in episode 47 of this podcast. She also has her own podcast, Living and Loving Your Life, and she's a life coach at chantelallencoaching.com. Vanessa Quigley owes her career as an opera singer to the fact that her parents encouraged what she thought was a weakness.
My parents, I was the oldest of 12, and so they had a lot to pay attention to. I think I did have the benefit of being the oldest because I was kind of in that prime spot. But I remember them once pointing out that I had a talent that I actually thought was a weakness. I loved music and I loved to sing, but every time I would sing, I would feel like I was going to cry. Like it would physically make it feel like my nose would start to tingle. And so I only sang in my bedroom because I was afraid that I would just start crying and that would just be horribly embarrassing. But they could hear that there was at least nice sounds coming out of my bedroom and were constantly encouraging me to develop those talents. And they had me take piano lessons, like anything in music to help me develop this talent that they thought I had, which I'm so grateful they did because I ended up majoring in music in college. I was an opera singer and music has been an important part of my life. And I'm just grateful that they pushed me outside of my comfort zone to develop that talent.
Vanessa doesn't sing opera very much anymore because she's busy taking care of her own 7 children, now all teenagers and up, and being the chapbooker-in-chief at Chatbooks, which she co-founded with her husband, Nate. You'll hear more from her next month in an episode about how she captures her own family memories. Vanessa is also going to lead us into our next point.
I think it's first important to acknowledge that every child is different. Not only are they different from each other, but they are different from me. I think I thought that all my kids were going to be just like me. And I knew exactly how to parent them because obviously they're going to like what I liked, but that is not true. That is definitely not true. And, because music was important to me, I made it a requirement for all of my kids to take piano lessons. They were all going to be pianists, and then they were all going to have to, make music part of their life. I had to surrender at one point when my daughter decided she wanted to play the guitar, and then my son wanted to do the saxophone. I mean, granted, they were still wanting to play music, but in their own way. And no one had any interest in being an opera singer. But I'm grateful all of my kids, from guitar to viola to my youngest is going to start playing the bass.
Oh, awesome. In the fall. This is a common assumption. These kids have our DNA. Aren't they going to like some of the same things we do? Well, it's lovely when it works out that way, but don't hold your breath. This was also a shocker for Janet Thompson, a motherhood mentor of mine from my childhood and a mother of 6.
I wanted to make everybody be like me or make everybody be like Bill, and they weren't anything like us. And so that was really hard. I wanted everybody to be good at math like I am, and none of my children ever got that. I just don't get it. I have a grandson now, Tyler. He loves math. He's good at math, and I'm so happy. I can't believe it,
And Adrienne Carden was just as surprised.
I played soccer growing up. I was a state champion soccer player. Woohoo! And I really wanted my kids to love soccer because I love soccer. But I also don't want to be the stage mom who's like pushing, where it's never going to be a thing that they love. And I need to be okay with that and respect them. And especially the perfectionist kids who just have a really hard time jumping into things that feel like work for them or feel like they're going to fail.
And so Adrienne encourages those perfectionists and her other children as well to experiment and try new things. This is our next tip for the day. Sometimes the only way to discover your kids' talents is to try out a wide variety of activities until you find one or two that really resonates with them. For one of Adrienne's sons, that new thing this summer was swimming.
My son, Milo, who's 9, this is his first year doing swim team. We've been doing it this summer, and he hated it. After the first day, he said, "I'm going to quit. I'm not coming back tomorrow." And I said, "Well, you're a little out of shape, maybe because of COVID, we've been doing a lot of inside things. Like, you know, it's been a while since you exercised regularly on a soccer team or something. I said, you just have to stick it out the week. And this is the first time I'd have a kid want to quit an extracurricular, and I didn't know how to handle that. I know it's like we're obsessed with not letting kids quit, which is probably a good impulse. And I didn't want to be the mom who's pushing him to do something that's truly miserable for him. So I said, just wait a week. And if you still want to quit at the end of the week, you can quit. I'm praying that he wouldn't, of course. He did the rest of the week. Even in a week, he was getting in better shape. He was more confident in the water. And on Friday, they did like the fun games, sharks and minnows, and let them go down the slide. Anyway, he was so excited. And then he decided to stay. On his very first swim meet ever, he took first place in his backstroke race and second place in his freestyle race, and was beaming and said he might even be interested in doing it next year. And then the really cool thing was we had a family reunion last week, and we had t-shirts for the kids to decorate, like puff paint, you know, and super 90s puff paint t-shirts. And he could have decided to do anything on his t-shirt, and he wrote, "I am a swimmer" on his t-shirt, which was, I didn't know he would have called himself that, but that's this little identity that he's kind of trying on. I hope that he always considers himself a swimmer. And I love to see that little badge of honor on his shirt like that. I thought just naming it was so important for him.
Don't you love it when it works out that way? Adrienne is quite an experimenter herself, always trying new things and cultivating her own talents, from writing to exploring outdoors to cooking and raising kids. I'm so excited that I get to share the incredible story behind Adrienne's recently published book of poetry in an episode at the end of this month. It is so great. I can't wait. But I digress. Let's go back to Adrienne and hear more of her thoughts on trying new things.
I was also thinking about this idea of this phrase that I hate, the fake it till you make it phrase, which on principle, I do like this phrase because I think it's a smart thing to do. And I can say this, I'm not someone who's afraid of failing. Like, I like to try a lot of things, so therefore I will fail a lot. That's how the equation will work out. But I wish we could reframe the like faking part of it, because it's really not faking anything. You're really just taking that first like hugely intimidating step. And that's requires a lot of faith. And I don't think there's anything more real than that. I think signing up for a new class that you've never done before, or cold calling like a potential client, I don't think that is faking it till you make it. I think that's working towards making it. So I sort of hate that phrase, because I don't think it's faking it. I think it's taking the first step, being the baby.
This idea reminded me of an Instagram post by another one of my favorite writers, Brooke Romney. In July, Brooke posted a great quote on Instagram that has morphed into a new family motto for us. She talked about making some big mistakes in her business and talking to her husband about how stupid she was. He turned to her and said, "Stop saying that. You are not stupid. You are new at this. You're trying to do something you've never done before. That's not dumb. It's inexperience and bravery." So now in our house, whenever someone says they're bad at something, we say, "You're not bad at this. You're new at this." Brooke is also an advocate of encouraging kids to try new things, but she warns that encouragement might not always be enough.
Sometimes when I force my kids to do things, it turns out great. And sometimes it turns out like, okay, great, we're going to check that off the list. I don't want to do that again. But I think that's also an important process. There's a really big push to have self-driven kids, which I agree 100%. And that is the ideal. But if you have teenage boys, there's probably a good chance that their default is, I would like to be lazy and I would like to not try things. I don't want to be seen as somebody who can't do it, or I don't want to do it if I'm not going to be the best. And so sometimes it means that you force activity and you force involvement, and they will get to you later. And I have one child who is so self-driven, we have to ask him to pull back sometimes because there's too much going on for him personally. That's only 1 out of 4. So the other 3, part of being a parent is helping them explore lots of different things, forcing them to do things when they would prefer to sit on the couch or play the Xbox because you know it's good for them. So I know everybody feels differently, and I agree that the ideal situation is when a child is completely self-driven and motivated. And most of us will have at least one child that has no self-motivation for at least a few years.
This advice applies to one of my sons in particular. He's passionate about whatever he's doing at the moment, So when it's time to do something else, he doesn't want to. If he's at home working on a project, he doesn't want to go swimming or for a hike. But when you convince him or force him to come, he has the time of his life. I had to force him to go to soccer practices for one whole season when he was younger, even though soccer was his idea. We're talking kicking and screaming. The next year, when he asked, there was no way I was signing him up. But 2 years later, I let him try again, and now he loves it. Brooke especially encourages experimentation with lots of different activities in middle school.
If I could just put a plug in for parents of junior high kids, force them into everything you possibly can in junior high, because you still have some pull and control of their life, and they start to have more opportunity, especially if you're someone who can't afford all of the private stuff when they're young. It's such a great time, and there are lots of kids who don't want to try in junior high, and so you get so many opportunities if you're someone who's willing. So just a huge plug for those years. I think a lot of parents just kind of pull back or shy away. If you can have them dig in, and try to tell my kids all the time, you never, ever, ever get the chance to explore your talents like you do when you're a kid. No one cares after that. No one cares if you really would like to be an artist, even though you're an accountant. No one cares. So during these years, if you can get involved in as many things as possible, try out as many things as possible, be a part of as many things as possible, no one will ever switch your work schedule so that you can play a basketball game ever again. Never in your whole life will that happen. So really dig in and try to make the most of those years. And for one, have a great time. And for two, develop talents and relationships. You never get that chance again. So
not all of these experiments are going to be successful. One of Brooke's sons is a great example of embracing failure.
One of my boys tries out and does almost everything. And he's okay if he doesn't make it. He is 100% okay if he doesn't make it. And I just think, oh my word, you are so brave. I would have never been that brave at that age. I would have never been that brave to just keep trying. And, he knows he's not even a good basketball player, and he tried out for the basketball team because he thought it would be fun to go to all the clinics and have fun with his friends and just try out. And he knew there was no chance that he would make it. And I can't tell you how happy it made me that he thought, I'd like to have this experience anyway.
Tiffany Feingold prepared her son for the inevitable failures by normalizing it.
Because at first, so many kids with ADHD, autism, some neurodiversities, probably not even subject to a neurodiversity, but won't try something because they fear they're not going to be good. Even try. And so I've shown videos over the years that I found online of people who've fallen over and over and over, where I'm even to the point where I don't think I would try again until they get the balance beam and, fall on their head or fall off or on a motorcycle or whatever.
Seeing other people work through their failures helps him with the courage to keep trying, and they've tried a lot of things.
We started so early where it was 3.5, great, let's get into soccer, let's do that, which quickly came to an end as far as that did not go well and it did not work out well. So we focused on individualized sports at that time. So let's go with swimming. We did do some small groups, which worked okay, but we were just trying different things. So swimming, skiing. We also noticed he has great athletic ability. He had great eye-hand coordination. So we would show him different things. We would go watch friends, kids play, whether it was football, soccer, baseball, different things to see really what he looked excited for. We, again, early on tried T-ball, which I think was way too slow and too boring for him because there's no way he's going to stand in the outfield waiting for action because he's going to be the action. So that quickly didn't, go into anything. And so not that I want him to try a hand in everything, but why not give him the opportunity to, and, see what really resonates.
I love Rebecca Brown-Wright's approach to experimentation.
One thing that's really fun is to put them all in the same sport and see how they all react to it. And see, we put them in sports thinking we were going to have them learn a sport, and that was our goal. And then we saw only one of our kids like sports so far. The other ones, I'm sure they might find a sport that they love eventually. But we found that by putting them in the sport and then watching, we learned that one just likes to socialize. When he was in T-ball, after the game, we'd say, "Oh, it was so great you hit the ball." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that was cool." But I talked to this kid and his mom is 32 and her favorite color is purple. And I talked to this other kid and his favorite animal is an elephant. And then he would like go through the whole team and he remembered their names and he remembered all these things about them that I wouldn't even think to ask at that age. And so we thought we were putting him into sports. And now how do we figure out how to help him develop that talent of this friendliness and this fun, and what activity can get him there? And
all this trying things out can be expensive.
And I know that sometimes finances can preclude some of those things, but there's a lot of opportunity to be self-taught. Like with YouTube, like there's never been more opportunity for kids to be able to pursue something. And it might mean that you do sit down with them at the piano with a YouTube lesson, you know, if you can't afford piano lessons, or that you take your kids out on a run if they want to maybe be able to run track later, but you don't have the opportunity to sign them up for that, or play tennis as a family. You know, there's lots of chances for us as parents to be able to give them the opportunity. And sometimes for me, you know, I'm not an artist at all, but even just being able to put out watercolors and crayons and give them the chance to explore their own creativity in those ways when they're young.
Cost aside, these activities can also take a lot of your time, especially with high-intensity club teams or dance troupes. But you can often find less intense options.
My girls, at one point, they got really into theater and felt like because they hadn't been dancing since they were 3, that they couldn't compete at the level of dance that these other girls were at. I found what was called a no pressure studio. It was not the most glamorous dance studio, and they didn't have the fanciest recitals, but it was a studio especially for girls who just wanted the joy of dancing with girls their own age. Because if they were to be put in the level of ability with other girls at the studio that all of their friends were going to, they were going to be teenagers with a bunch of elementary aged girls.
That is amazing that even exists. I love that.
I was so grateful. So, you know, look around. They don't have to be on the travel soccer team. They can do rec soccer. They can do the no pressure dance studio. There are other ways to enjoy and develop talents that aren't like making the headlines and getting the scholarships.
We followed the same playbook with the soccer playing son I mentioned earlier. Since club soccer is one of the only options for playing soccer in our town, which is really pricey and has an intense practice and game schedule, we found a rec league in a neighboring town that was much less intense. This was just the jumpstart he needed to play on the middle school team this fall, which practices and plays games right after school, so I'm not driving him all over the place. The last tip I'm going to share is kind of the polar opposite of the try all sorts of things approach we've been talking about. It's letting our kids have downtime. I know, where can kids find downtime if they're so busy trying stuff? Quarantine was a great reminder for all of us that we might just need to take a break from it once in a while. Chanel Nielsen, a mom of 4 and a business coach for moms, is all for boredom. You may be surprised about what talents come forward when kids have unscheduled time to themselves.
Okay, I have to mention this book, Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne, one of my absolute favorite books. He mentions letting kids be bored. And I think that's one of my parenting superpowers. I let my kids be bored. And what happens when the kids are bored is amazing things. I feel like my kids get bored and then they get creative, and it looks different ways for all of them. But sometimes they'll create games, or like my daughter, when she was little, I remember she could make anything out of paper, shoes out of paper, and she'd wear them around. My son will like go have some time alone, and he'll make, the other day he made a Nacho Libre mask. Like, letting them just explore and have at it has been huge, and letting them be bored. And so I think the role there for me as a parent has been, one, when they are bored and they're like, Mom, I'm bored, what should I do? I just say, oh, then I learned this from Kim John Payne. Oh, you're bored? And that's it. And that's all you say. And they're like, oh, Mom, you know, they want more. They want a solution. And then sometimes if they persist, then I'll be like, well, you know what I say about being bored? Like, that's awesome. Something awesome is about to happen. And they usually don't come to me with being bored anymore, but that's something that I've tried to cultivate in them, and to to help them to do.
You may be surprised about what talents come forward when kids have unscheduled time for themselves. It worked for Madison Wilson.
Since COVID shut down some parts of the world, well, not some parts, but the whole
the world.
In 2020, I started braiding and finding new talents that I had because, well, what else was I supposed to do? I was bored.
Yeah, she started playing with braiding, and then I started watching, and she was good because I can't braid. So I can braid down, but I can't braid to the scalp. And she was beginning to really show some potential. And so we put her in a braiding boot camp because she wants to learn. And in 3 hours, she learned how to cornrow and do some more complicated types of braiding. And she's loving it. She has a mannequin and puts in hair. It's crazy.
Okay, so after all these interviews, one of my new favorite things in the world is to hear moms describe their kids' unique talents. It's a beautiful thing to hear the love and excitement in their voices, but it's also really useful to hear about the strengths of other kids that you might be able to recognize in your own. So I wanted to end the episode the way I began it, with a couple of these moms talking about more of the talents they've discovered in their kids. There are just so many possibilities. We'll start with Tiffany Feingold.
Oh, he has such a kind heart. His superpower is truly giving. He will give. He loves writing notes too. So he will find any cards that I have laying around, and he'll just write notes to all the neighbor kids, to people, and then he'll take pennies and quarters and stick them in there because he wants to give gifts. So I tell him, like, wow, you have a heart of gold, that you want to make people smile. You want people to feel accepted. And that's just a wonderful gift that he has, is such a big heart.
Next up is Becky Squire talking about some of the talents she's recognized in her own kids.
So my firstborn son, he's very obedient. That's probably like his biggest quality. He's just obedient. And it's funny because my husband and I thought like we were the best parents because he did everything we told him to do. And he still pretty much does. And he's 16 years old. Then we had my daughter after him. We had her 19 months after. And we were just like, oh, we're going to rock this parenting thing because we're just so awesome. And she is not obedient. I mean, she's a very good girl. Don't get me wrong. But she has her own ideas and her own mind. And so some of the words that I've always used to describe her have been like independent and determined and like feisty. But at the same time, I've always known that she was going to be really strong, like mentally strong, and that she would change the world. And then my other son is a social butterfly, and he makes friends wherever he goes. And he just started junior high 3 days ago. And I kept telling him, I was like, do not let junior high school change you. Meaning that he's just so innocent, and he'll go up to anybody and just talk to them like they've been best friends their whole lives. And by the end, that person thinks that they're best friends. On his first day of kindergarten, I went to pick him up. And as he was walking toward my car, all ages of kids, even up to the 6th graders, bye, Eli, see ya. And I was like, who are all these kids? And he's like, I don't know. Everybody just loves Eli. And so that's him. And then my youngest, I love seeing him learn and grow and just be his own person. And he's just loyal and good. And so he's changing. They're all changing the world in their own ways. I think if you have even just like a little fleeting thought, like, oh, I love the way that you do that, tell your children. It'll make a big difference.
And finally, here's Vanessa Quigley talking about her youngest son.
He's just breaking all of the molds. He has an insatiable curiosity for things and how things work. And when I think back just over the last couple of years, how his interests have peaked on everything from yo-yoing, like not just like learn how to yo-yo, but like learn all of the benefits of the variety of yo-yos into the professional world of yo-yoing, the accessories of yo-yoing, all of the tricks. He gets to learn how to build his own yo-yo, how to film yo-yo videos, joining yo-yo forums. And then, once he feels like he's got that figured out, he moves on to origami. That was the next thing. And origami is exciting, wonderful world. He has boxes and boxes of origami creations in his room that we still can't part with. But like fly fish, fly tying for fly fishing. Right now he's in cooking. In fact, just a second ago, I heard my door open and I looked over and he's holding a plate of spam musubi. He's into anime right now also. And so Japanese cooking is a natural,
Yeah.
evolution from that. So he's learning how to work with, spam and rice and seaweed.
In fact, a few minutes later, this talented kid came into the room with said musubi.
Okay, hold on a
Oh,
second.
that looks delicious. Yes.
I just have to show you.
That's amazing.
Are you offering this to me? Is this for me to eat? Yeah. Wow, this is a lot.
What a son.
Okay, thank you, honey. I will, after this, I will come back down. All right, you're the best, honey. I love you. Can you shut the door?
So we'll leave Vanessa to enjoy her musubi, and I'll leave you to discover and enjoy the unique talents of your own children. Thank you so much for listening to the How She Moms podcast and for being part of this community. There are so many other ways for you to connect and hopefully also contribute. I share tips and ideas regularly on Instagram and Facebook at How She Moms, and we also have a Facebook group that you can join, which is the main place for more philosophical discussions about the ideas I'll be discussing on future episodes of the podcast. It's also one of the best ways for you to contribute to future episodes. You can find past episodes and other resources at howshemoms.com. I have big plans for revamping my site this fall, so stay tuned for that. And you can always just email me directly at whitney@howshemoms.com. Special thanks to my own wonderful mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.